On Earth, a sudden appearance of monstrous beings called Aragami engulfed the entire planet in darkness. They devoured all forms of life on Earth. Some Aragami are the size of humans, others are unimaginably large, and human weapons could not kill them. Thousands of years of human civilization were destroyed in an instant. In order to survive, the remaining humans established the last defense zone called Fenrir. They utilized the cells of Aragami to create superhuman warriors known as God's Eaters to combat the Aragami threat. However, only those humans and their relatives recognized by the Aragami cells were allowed to enter and live in the Fenrir defense zone. Renka is a teenager who passed the preliminary test to become a God's Eater. He aspired to become a true God's Eater and eradicate the Aragami outside the defense zone. The next step was to inject Aragami cells into his body. After Renka has successfully fused with Aragami cells, Renka will wear a special bracelet on his hand. He will become a junior God's Eater. As a newly appointed God's Eater, Renka was eager to participate in battles. However, he was promptly stopped by Commander Tsubaki, who believed it would be suicidal for him to face the Aragami at that stage. Consequently, Renka could only train within the base using the virtual system. Renka showed great talent as he easily handled low-level Aragami simulations in his initial training. However, he had a fatal flaw. He would rush to aid his teammates whenever they were injured, leading to his failure in virtual training. In order to complete his training quickly, Renka spent nearly the entire day in the training room. Each God's Eater was equipped with a personalized weapon called God Arcs, forged from the cells of the Aragami. It's also the most effective weapon to kill Aragami. Renka's God Arcs were already completed and would be his weapon for slaying the Aragami from now on. The invasion of Aragami this time was massive, with simultaneous attacks from two directions on Fenrir. The God's Eater forces within the base were unable to counter them all. The outer defense wall of Fenrir was breached in an instant, and Commander Tsubaki had no choice but to dispatch teams from other locations to provide support. However, it was already too late. Renka volunteered for the mission, but Commander Tsubaki immediately rejected his request. The scarcity of individuals capable of fusing with Aragami cells made her unwilling to let an inexperienced God's Eater sacrifice himself. But Renka's purpose in becoming a God's Eater was to kill the Aragami. After saying that, he ran straight to the God Arcs room and began the certification process for his God Arcs. Tsubaki wanted to close the gate leading outside, but Renka was faster. His fusion with Aragami cells had enhanced his physical strength beyond that of an ordinary person. With just a burst of acceleration and a few jumps, Renka broke out of the God's Eater base. When he arrived at the scene, it was already a living hell on Earth. In the face of the Aragami, ordinary people had no means to fight back. Renka raised his God Arcs and charged. After a few clashes, Renka's weapon was knocked out of his hands by the Aragami. In an instant, several Aragami surrounded him. Renka's teammates urged him to escape, knowing that a God's Eater without a God Arcs had no chance of killing the Aragami. But Renka didn't run away. Instead, he grabbed a wooden stick and fought back against the Aragami. Seizing the opportunity when Renka was knocked down, an airborne Aragami charged towards him with its jaws wide open. At this critical moment, three God's Eaters suddenly appeared. They were none other than the elite members of the first squad, the most formidable team in the God's Eater ranks. They had just returned from a mission and hurriedly came to provide support. The ferocious Aragami that had threatened Renka moments ago were now easily slaughtered by the first squad. However, at this moment, an Aragami targeted a girl who had yet to evacuate. Renka immediately rushed to her aid. It turned out that Renka's God Arcs were a rare new type that could transform into a long-range attack mode. But the battle was not over. After God Arcs transformed into a gun, Renka didn't know how to transform it back into a great sword. He could only passively defend against the Aragami's attacks. Fortunately, Sakuya provided timely support. Just then, a gigantic Aragami arrived at the scene. But this kind of Aragami only appears in dangerous areas. The first squad had no choice but to take the situation seriously. Sakuya, as a God Arcs wielder specialized in firearms, began teaching Renka how to use the gun form of the God Arcs. The group immediately launched a coordinated assault on the Aragami. Renka charged straight at the Aragami's forefront and fired a shot at its head. But Aragami wasn't dead, and he was in danger. Fortunately, Rindo, the captain of the first squad, came to Renka's rescue just in time. At this moment, the Aragami completely lost their sanity and began unleashing widespread magical attacks. Fortunately, other team members arrived to provide support and interrupted the Aragami's spellcasting. Rindo entrusted Renka to the care of his teammates and ventured alone to confront the Aragami. After a night of intense battle, all invading Aragami were eradicated. However, Just as everyone relaxed their guard, a seemingly lifeless Aragami suddenly leaped up and attempted to devour Renka. One of his teammates deflected the attack with his own body. Sadly, after the battle, they had lost another God's Eater. Due to Renka's violation of orders, he was imprisoned and awaiting punishment. There was a high possibility that he would be stripped of his God's Eater qualification. Meanwhile, the branch director proposed the God Shield plan, which required a significant amount of Aragami energy. Losing another new type God's Eater would be a severe blow since their combat power was already scarce. The branch decided to request the dispatch of a new type God's Eater from headquarters. Commander Tsubaki and Captain Rindo were also troubled by this situation because Renka was indeed a promising rookie. Unfortunately, he was on the verge of losing his God's Eater status before he could fully grow. During the funeral for their fallen comrade, Rindo overheard a discussion about Renka continuing to fight against Aragami even without a weapon. Intrigued, he went to the prison to find Renka and asked him why he would do such a thing, but Renka said that if he was running away because he had no weapons, he'd rather die. On another front, the new type God's Eater, who was flying to the branch, came under attack by skyborne Aragami. Countless Aragami relentlessly collided with the aircraft, resulting in the destruction of 2 planes within minutes. The branch received a distress call and immediately dispatched the first squad for the rescue mission. However, the mission required a team of 3, and Soma, their teammate, had not returned from his mission yet. In light of this, Rindo proposed letting Renka participate in the operation. If he could excel in this mission, it might persuade the higher-ups to reconsider his punishment. Rindo's only request was for him not to die. If things became dire, Renka should escape and find a place to hide, taking the opportunity to eliminate the enemy. That's how the first team operates. The new type God's Eater, Elisa, no longer passively waited and engaged the attacking Aragami. When Renka and the others arrived, they witnessed numerous Aragami relentlessly pursuing the aircraft, while Elisa fought against them in the sky. Rindo established communication with Elisa and assured her that they would create an escape route for her to retreat to the back of the aircraft. In this situation, they had to abandon the transport plane and prioritize rescuing Elisa. However, Elisa immediately rejected the proposal, stating that she didn't need their rescue. Helplessly, Rindo had to focus on providing cover for her. Despite being a fellow rookie God's Eater, Elisa was on an entirely different level from Renka. She had mastered the use of God Arcs to an extraordinary degree. Renka's long-range ammunition was running low, and Elisa's supply was also dwindling. But in the next moment, Elisa released the Aragami within her God Arcs and immediately devoured other Aragami to replenish her ammunition. Renka finally realized that the new type God Arcs could be used in such a way. However, the Aragami also mutated, becoming even more powerful and intelligent, summoning reinforcements. Countless Aragami swiftly approached from the distance. Rindo and his team must get to Elisa before the Aragami do. They split up to take action, with Sakuya providing remote support from the helicopter. Rindo and Renka descended into the transport plane to find Elisa. However, Elisa paid no attention to them and ran directly into the interior of the plane. Renka chased after her but was suddenly attacked by Elisa. She knocked him down and took up her weapon, ready to leave. Renka couldn't understand why Elisa was so stubborn. He followed her, only to discover that there were dozens of injured personnel inside the transport plane. However, Renka received orders to bring back only Elisa, and their helicopter couldn't accommodate so many people. It was evident that the higher-ups intended to abandon these injured personnel, but Elisa didn't want to leave them alone. At this moment, Renka made a decision. He chose to stay here and fight alongside Elisa. Upon hearing Renka's determination, Rindo also decided to protect the transport plane. They immediately began formulating a battle plan. Sakuya was responsible for providing cover. Renka and Elisa were tasked with dealing with the gigantic Aragami. The 4 of them each had their roles. The battle commenced immediately. They fought until dusk, eliminating all the Aragami. The group was exhausted and panting. However, Sakuya quickly sent a warning. The radar detected another Aragami approaching. This time, there was only one Aragami coming. The radar showed its immense size, but the exact measurements were indiscernible. Rindo made a quick decision. He instructed Sakuya to activate the helicopter's autopilot mode to attract the huge Aragami. If they could successfully lure the Aragami away, it would be ideal. Fighting against such a massive Aragami in the sky would be a hopeless battle. However, shortly after the helicopter departed, they witnessed a shocking scene. A monstrously gigantic creature suddenly appeared in the clouds. It was chasing after the helicopter. They finally breathed a sigh of relief. Rindo and his team managed to bring Elisa back to the base, and the higher-ups revoked Renka's punishment. Shortly after, Commander Amamiya called another newcomer to join them, and formally assigned Renka and Elisa, both still rookies, to the first unit for mission execution. The team leader is Rindo, and the vice-captains are Sakuya and team member Soma. Unlike the cruel world outside, the Fenrir Defense Zone regularly provided food to the civilians. Koda's mother also resided in the civilian area, and he excitedly told her that he had officially become a member of the God's Eater. However, his mother's expression revealed her concern because being a God's Eater meant Koda was constantly at risk of death. After comforting his mother, Koda left home. Koda and Renka walked among the ruins where the Aragami had invaded. Houses could be rebuilt, but the deceased would never come back to life. This strengthened their determination to complete the Shield of Humanity plan. This plan was introduced by their branch director, Agiruma, as a scheme to save humanity. The plan involved constructing a massive shelter on the sea, serving as a refuge for the remaining humans. It was humanity's last hope. Renka knew that eliminating every Aragami completely was almost impossible. But to accomplish the Shield of Humanity plan, a large number of Aragami cores were needed. All hope rested on them, the God's Eaters. Their first official mission was to hunt down and retrieve the cores of 6 medium-sized Aragami. Under Sakuya's guidance, Renka quickly succeeded in capturing the core of 1 Aragami. Although it was a team operation, Elisa continued to act on her own, disregarding Sakuya's order to support Renka. Fortunately, Soma arrived in time to assist Renka. Elisa claimed to have completed the mission objective and believed there was no need to waste any more time. The team didn't exhibit the unity they had imagined. Once the mission was completed, Rindo ordered them to return to the base. However, on their way, they were intercepted by the displaced people living outside the Fenrir Defense Zone, constantly living in fear of being devoured by Aragami. They longed to reside within the walls of Fenrir, but even if Rindo escorted them there, they were stopped by guards. Resources within the city were limited, and allowing the displaced people in would surely lead to riots. Renka could only watch as they were expelled from the city. The little girl was looking back at the city at the end, hoping that someone would save them. Renka felt powerless because he himself had come from the outside world. Knowing how cruel it was, the only way to help these displaced people was to quickly complete the Shield of Humanity plan. However, after a full day of hunting, the progress on the plan had only increased by 0.6%. The medium-sized Aragami they hunted today would require tens of thousands more to complete the plan, and even the large Aragami would require hunting thousands of them. But they remembered how just a single large Aragami invasion had devastated Fenrir. Soon, their second mission was issued. This time, they were tasked with subduing 2 large Aragami. However, Rindo and Soma were still out on another mission and hadn't returned. As the vice team leader, Sakuya took command of this mission. She demanded that they must obey orders and immediately retreat if she deemed it dangerous. After all, large Aragami were not easy opponents. Through the use of traps and ambushes, Renka and Elisa cooperated to defeat one of the large Aragami. Koda took the opportunity to deliver the final blow to the Aragami. They immediately moved to track down the other Aragami, only to discover that it had captured humans as hostages. Concerned about harming the hostages, Renka and the others hesitated to launch an attack. Just then, several Aragami suddenly appeared and surrounded them. In that moment, an even larger black Aragami emerged. In a matter of seconds, it devoured and consumed the other Aragami. Elisa recognized this black giant Aragami as Dyaus Pita, the one responsible for killing her parents. Elisa rushed forward, but Sakuya immediately ordered her to be brought back and then ordered a retreat. However, Dyaus Pita's power far exceeded their expectations. With just one strike, Elisa was sent flying, and Sakuya was injured. The survivors could only flee in panic. Renka and Elisa continued to attack Dyaus Pita, but it displayed incredibly swift speed. Elisa was quickly knocked unconscious. Renka leaped up, attempting to ambush Dyaus Pita, but it suddenly spread its wings, and its sharp spikes pierced through Renka's body. Dyaus Pita then charged at the remaining survivors. Renka desperately tried to stop it, but in the next moment, his god arcs were severed by Dyaus Pita, and his body was impaled. Pinned to the ground, the fleeing people were devoured by Dyaus Pita in an instant. Elisa forced herself to stand up to attract Dyaus Pita's attention. Renka escaped death. Shortly after, she faints. With the covering fire from Sakuya and Koda, Renka dragged the unconscious Elisa, attempting to escape from the scene. However, Dyaus Pita disregarded Sakuya's attacks and crazily charged at Renka. Fortunately, the stone bridge couldn't withstand the weight of the Aragami. They fell into the river together. When Renka woke up, Dyaus Pita was nowhere to be found. However, they were still in the habitat of the Aragami. Renka had no choice but to bring the unconscious Elisa to an abandoned building. As soon as Elisa regained consciousness, she immediately wanted to go outside and search for her god arcs. However, Renka had fallen into a state of unconsciousness due to severe blood loss. Elisa injected Aragami cell reagents into Renka's body to suppress his injuries. Now, there were countless Aragami outside, and they had lost their god arcs. Just then, an Aragami suddenly attacked Elisa. In a critical moment, Renka managed to kill the Aragami in time. However, Renka's god arcs were only half empty. He decided to help Elisa find her god arcs first while evading the Aragami. They followed the river, searching their way back, but the Dyaus Pita had left a shadow of fear in Elisa's mind. She could never forget the sight of her parents being killed. After several hours of exploration, Elisa finally found her god arcs. However, what terrified her was that even with the god arcs in her hands, she couldn't continue to fight. At this moment, she was filled with fear towards the Aragami. Renka, holding his half-intact god arcs, charged forward to block the approaching Aragami, but the Aragami didn't rush to attack. They seemed to be waiting for Renka to exhaust himself, and Renka was in despair. Then he gave up the fight. At that critical moment, Rindo suddenly appeared and swiftly eliminated the Aragami. Rindo questioned Renka if he had forgotten his command to find a way to survive no matter what. Rindo then reported their safety to headquarters. However, with numerous Aragami blocking their path, he couldn't take them back to the base. Rindo decided to bring them to his secret base. There are tons of trees here, because Aragami consumed everything in their path. They would never let these many plants go untouched. Just as Renka was about to touch one of the trees, Rindo stopped him. There was also a massive dam and a village in the area. The little girl who couldn't enter Fenrir for refuge was surprisingly here. The people inside were those who couldn't enter Fenrir and lived here, producing their own food and being self-sufficient. This safe area was Rindo's masterpiece. He gathered the survivors here and used stolen supplies from headquarters to set traps around the village. Through accidental experiments, he discovered that Aragami cells could be injected into plants, cultivating a fusion between the plants and the Aragami. These plants would then feed on the Aragami. Any Aragami that approached would be consumed by them. Rindo's task was to regularly inject the plants with Aragami genes. However, these plants could only deal with low-level, small Aragami and had no effect on high-level, large Aragami. At that moment, two large Aragami quickly broke through the forest, with one of them heading towards the village. Rindo decided to confront the Aragami in the forest alone, and instructed Renka to go back to the village to protect the villagers. Although the villagers fought back with all their might, human weapons were ineffective against the Aragami. With Renka's god arcs only half intact, he called out loudly for Elisa to come out and support them. However, Elisa, consumed by fear, cowered in her room, trembling. She was no longer able to fight against the Aragami. Renka had no choice but to lead the villagers into hiding. Suddenly, an idea came to his mind on how to defeat the Aragami. While he couldn't kill them directly, he realized that if he could lure Aragami into the dam, and then open the floodgates, the rushing water would wash the Aragami away into the river. The key was how to attract the attention of the Aragami. Then Renka thought of Rindo's injection. If he injected the Aragami with the reagents, Aragami would surely chase after him. Then he could lead Aragami into the dam. Renka and the villagers split up, with him delaying the Aragami while the villagers retrieved the injections. In a thrilling battle, Renka successfully obtained the injections and immediately injected them into the Aragami. It indeed caused damage, but it quickly wrapped its body in a hard shell. Faced with desperation, Renka made a bold move. He injected the reagents directly into his own god arcs. The next moment, the Aragami inside Renka's god arcs unexpectedly revived and successfully pushed it into the dam. The villagers quickly opened the floodgates, and the rushing water washed the Aragami out of the village. Renka realized that his god arcs were not dead. If he could return to the base, there must be a way to repair it. Meanwhile, Rindo returned triumphant. Elisa, witnessing the battle outside, was consumed by deep self-blame. Soon after, headquarters received everyone back. Elisa was scheduled for psychological treatment. Minister Aguruma looked at the report handed to him by Amamiya. and started to feel a headache coming on. According to Dr. John's investigation, including Dyaus Pita, many large Aragami had started to gather around their branch. Aguruma urgently wanted John to find a way to restore Renka's god arcs. Meanwhile, Rindo was assigned a solo mission by Aguruma. Before leaving, he told Vice Captain Sakuya to consult with Renka if anything happened. Days passed, and in a meeting room, Aguruma noticed a sudden increase in the number of Aragami. He decided to expedite the completion of the God Shield plan. His plan was to use devices to lure Aragami with the same attributes into ambush zones, and concentrate firepower to eliminate them. He then unveiled his new plan, the Meteor Plan. The first squad gathered, their target being to slay Dyaus Pita. However, despite their seamless cooperation and relentless attacks, they couldn't inflict even the slightest damage on Dyaus Pita. It even wore a mocking expression. Soma swung his sword forward, but just as the blade was about to strike its wing, Dyaus Pita chose to evade. Unlike before when it would confront attacks head-on, Renka noticed Dyaus Pita's unusual behavior. As he carefully observed Dyaus Pita, he suddenly discovered a small scar on its wing. Immediately, Renka rushed forward. His 4 teammates also began attacking Dyaus Pita. The high-frequency assaults left Dyaus Pita no time to think. Seizing the opportunity, Renka leaped up and successfully severed Dyaus Pita's tentacles. However, this action triggered Dyaus Pita to go berserk completely. It unleashed a frenzy of lightning, instantly causing severe injuries to all of Renka's teammates. But even in the face of such adversity, there was one person who didn't back down. Renka's final skill was to fuse with his god arcs. The team members, who understood his intentions, had only one thought: to buy Renka more time. However, Dyaus Pita easily incapacitated them. Dyaus Pita wore a mocking expression. Just then, Renka appeared behind it, paying the price of half his body being consumed. Renka made his blade incredibly sharp. With one swift strike, Renka shattered Dyaus Pita's formidable body into pieces. However, Dyaus Pita made a final desperate counterattack. Yet, when the smoke cleared, Renka descended from above and pierced the core of Dyaus Pita with his sword. Finally, everything came to an end. Little did they know that their hard-fought victory only killed an advanced Aragami. And what kind of existence is the giant Renka that once appeared in the sky? John entered the minister's room. Aguruma stated that he had killed the problematic Rindo. As the God Shield plan was merely a deception, his true plan was a rocket launcher. He would take selected humans to seek refuge in space. When the Aragami ultimately faced extinction, he would return to Earth to rebuild human civilization. However, John believed that the Aragami would evolve and gain intelligence, suggesting the possibility of coexistence with humans in the future. Who was right in the end? Only time could provide the answer.